There's no job like your first job. Find out how the brightest minds in HR, talent, and recruiting got their start. This is My First Job, hosted by Mike Wood, only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Welcome, friends, to another in-person edition of My First Job. My name is Mike Wood, and we're coming to you semi-live from Transform Conference, and I'm very excited to be sitting down with CEO of Greenhouse, Daniel Chait. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So this is a fun podcast where we talk about people's first jobs.
Yeah.
What was your first job?
So, little secret about me, not much of a secret. I've been an entrepreneur. I've worked for myself for 28 years plus now. So the last time I had a job was 1997. Wow. So let's just talk about like when we say my first job, like it was a bit ago. But I was very fortunate. I've always been entrepreneurial, and I've always been technical. I was a programmer, and I love doing. So I always did these business projects for businesses for hire, like as a high school and college kid over the summertime. Yeah. So I developed a bunch of technical skills and a bunch of business skills at a very young age. So fast forward, I graduated from engineering school as a programmer, and I applied to a software company in Washington, D.C., a little small software company, and I had sent them in a sample of my work. And I went down to interview with them, and the whole interview was, show us your project. And I pulled up a computer, and I walked them through the code and showed them how it worked. That was great. I only learned later, they didn't believe me that I had done it. Because they were like, what 19-year-old builds systems to help school districts like manage their student population or like help these other businesses and things I had done.
So that very
as a
successful
kid.
future leaders of America.
But that was always like, that was who I was. Like I was a B2B software nerd, before it was cool. So I was really lucky. It was a tiny software company, 19 people, but incredible density of talent, and just like made some great relationships that have continued to this day.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And now you're the CEO of Greenhouse, which has been growing tremendously. I love all the things that you're doing. I love that you care about the candidate.
I do.
Because that's something that I stress a lot of times. How did you get started with the whole, tell me about the origins of Greenhouse.
Yeah, so if you fast forward from those early, that early job, which I didn't really last very long in, and so I had started a couple of businesses before Greenhouse. In the early part of my entrepreneurial career, I was a technical person, and I was in New York, so I was doing a lot of work in Wall Street and financial services. And in that world, what I learned very quickly was hiring is the most important thing in my business. I was building a consulting practice and competing for talent and placing a bet with my own dollar. Everyone I hired, if I could bill them to customers, we'd make a profit. If I couldn't, I literally had to fund their salary out of my own pocket. So as someone who's not a gambler, and I say that here in Vegas, I was making a six-figure bet with my own money every single time I hired someone. So you got to be really good at it. And so I put in a lot of time, and I developed a bunch of knowledge, which really reflected a lot of existing best practices. I didn't invent anything, but just learned how do companies that get it right do it. And I had to do that as a matter of survival and as a key strategy for growing my company. So that was the early part of my career. Fast forward the clock, I sold that company in 2010, left in 2011, started Greenhouse in 2012. An insight we had was when you look at every company, what you see is most of them will say that hiring is one of their top priorities or top challenges, and that it's one of the biggest pain points they have, that they're generally feeling bad at it, but not everyone. And some companies do a really great job. And what we thought was the things that the companies do that hire really well, every company can do. They can do it. They just aren't. And so that insight led us to create Greenhouse with the mission to help every company become great at hiring. And the approach we took was there's proven best practices to how to be great at hiring. The companies that do it, it works. We're going to help every company do those things. And we think that will create a lot of value, to your point, not only for those companies who are hiring, but much more broadly for the hundreds of millions of job seekers who are suffering at the hands of these broken hiring processes. And so it was a really inspiring mission because, it had big economic value. There's a lot of dollars at stake, but also there's some heart there. You feel like you're actually helping people.
No, and it's a big decision when you are applying for a job and you actually care about the company and you're trying to get in. It's very frustrating, and the time scale that people don't realize that when you're out of work, you're looking every day. You're looking for all sorts of different ways to get back into the game. Now, I've talked a lot with people about the current state of hiring and that there's just so much out there.
Yeah.
There's like, you go to apply to anything on LinkedIn, there's 3,000 people ahead of you that already applied. How does Greenhouse make it easier for hiring teams and candidates?
Yeah, and when we talk about the state of hiring, let's be clear, it's not one thing.
Yeah,
what it's like to apply for a job on the assembly line at Revlon is very different than what it's like to apply for a job as an AI engineer,
Yep.
At a tech company or something like that. So they're very different, and the markets are always moving in different directions as well. So today, where we sit in spring of 2025, the market for kind of knowledge workers in technology is very much in favor of the employers. There are relatively few jobs open, and tons of applications. And with the ease of use of technology, making it easier and easier to apply for jobs, there's more and more applications. Our average recruiter is handling about 20% more job applications than they were a year ago. Over 400, almost 450 job applications at a given time per recruiter. And so they're overwhelmed. And what that means for the company is it's getting harder and harder for them to sift through all the noise and find the signal. And for the job seeker, what it means is even as it's getting easier and easier to apply for a job, it's getting harder and harder to get a job. And so it's depressing. They feel like they're doing all this activity and they're using tools and they're automating their own AI, and it's not helping. And so what are we doing about it? I think the solution is not piling more AI onto the problem. It turns out that if you just make it easier and easier to apply for more and more jobs, you're going to get more and more of that.
This is the catch-22 that we've been in the past
you've got
years.
this so the candidates are using AI to apply for hundreds of jobs at a time, and then the companies want to use AI to sift through it all and get back to the real app. It's like, where does it end?
Yeah.
It's like, if you follow that logic, isn't every time you open a job, everyone on earth is going to be in your pipeline, and then you just have to sift through the whole...
You have to filter out the spam.
It's like almost like a spam problem. And so what we're doing about it is we're actually creating useful, surfacing, I would say, useful information about both sides that we uniquely can do.
Yep.
What do I mean by that? If you're an employer and you're hiring using Greenhouse, a lot of what you do every day, a lot of how you act every day, you're doing in Greenhouse. And so we know which hiring managers get back to candidates quickly and which ones don't. We know which ones fill in their scorecards really completely and actually collect a lot of data to make decisions, and which ones don't. We know which ones do things to make the process more inclusive and more fair, and which ones don't. It turns out that information is really useful to candidates.
Yep.
If you're a job seeker, you want that information. Well, we're surfacing that now with Greenhouse Verified right on your careers page. So it's a great way for the employer to stand out from all that noise. Be like, I'm one of the good ones. I'm the one that's going to get back to you. This is not a ghost job. We're not going to treat you badly. They can showcase that right on their careers page. And what that means for the job seeker is they don't have to think of how do I buy more tickets to spam more companies. I can just focus my search on those few ones I know a lot about.
No, I could see almost like a badge on LinkedIn at some point for verified, verified, like you're going to have a human connection with us and we're going to treat you like a person.
And it's not based on a survey. It's not based on an anonymous report from an applicant that might be frustrated and want to vent online. This is the actual what they're doing as they manage their candidates, interact with candidates. And same on the job seeker side, because tens of millions of job seekers every year do that work through Greenhouse. In fact, I just saw a job application today from somebody who applied for a job at Greenhouse, and he said, I want to work at your company because I've been a customer, I've used the product, and now that I'm on the job market, I'm applying to tons of jobs, and I noticed that when I apply to jobs through Greenhouse, it's a better experience. Now, the software is a better interface for them to apply to a job through, but also the companies that they're applying to, they tend to be more thoughtful. They're using the features to create a better experience for that job seeker. And so his point was, as a job seeker, you've got a huge stake in this process, obviously, as well. It matters how you treat that job seeker as a software platform. And so we're also thinking about how do we take the job seeker's behavior and use that to help them stand out to the employer, so that they're not sifting through a bunch of spam, but they're actually finding who's that one person or that small number of people who are right for this job right now.
I love it because there's you have competitors and stuff in the high volume hiring space, and that they're just getting butts and seats and whatever, and you can automate the hell out of that if that's all you care about is just getting a person there. But I think for people that have multiple skills or knowledge workers, it just hurts more with the automation. You want to talk to somebody. You want to actually, face to face talk about what do they need. Do I have what they need? Is this going to be a good fit for me?
Yeah, look, I think there's a huge role for automation, and we're leaning heavily into automation for lots of parts of the process because it helps you be more efficient, sure, but it helps you be more creative. It helps you spot problems or opportunities that you may not have the eyes to see. So there's a ton of opportunity and upside in bringing automation, bringing AI, which I like to think of as augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, because it helps you think, it doesn't think for you.
It's like an e-bike.
Right? You got it. Yeah. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there as we bring these technologies to our customers. What it doesn't do is replace the human element completely. And I think that's a bit of a fallacy, that there's this magical day in the future where you will say, I want to hire X, and you wake up tomorrow and that person's working for you. Like, I don't think that's...
No, because you're still going to you still have to trust that what's being presented in front of you is what's actually part of the candidate.
Hiring is part art and part science.
Yeah.
And there's a human element to it. It's one of the most emotional things that happens at work, if you think about it, is getting a job or hiring someone. It's like, you don't get that many jobs in your life, maybe a few. Like when you do, you email your family, you tell your friends, like this is you celebrate. And when you hire someone, if you ever hired someone that's like that, that missing cog on my team that brings it all together. I just had someone accept a job last night.
Nice.
At my company, that when they accepted the job, like we were all on Slack, like sending heart emojis to each other and woohooing. And so it's not just another KPI, it's not just another OKR, like these are real human moments that matter. And so trying to bring some of that to the forefront and combine it with the opportunities of technology is like a lot of what Greenhouse is all about.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on my first job. I look forward to seeing everywhere that Greenhouse is going to be this year. Thank you very much.